What is going on, people? Good to have you back with us here at Unfiltered. This one officially go down as episode number 282. In your scorecards, you can get on board 24/7, 365 on the Unfiltered Revolution, Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts, and of course on Twitter, X, YouTube, and elsewhere. As always, presented by BetOnline, number one source for your sports betting needs and latest matchups and lines. You can get over to the website, use the promo code BELIEVE, it's BLEAV, and get a 50% welcome deposit as I welcome longtime friend and one of the premier journalists in any, the number one journalist in MMA and combat sports space, the host of the MMA Hour, and a fellow Knicks fan, Ariel Helwani. Ariel, appreciate this. Long time no speak, my friend. How are you?
Yes, Casey, my man. It is great to be on. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for having me. Long overdue, so I appreciate it very much and looking forward to it.
Yeah, I wanted to start here because I think back to, I often think about how much MMA has grown. And I think back to 2006, 2007, sitting on a desk at Versus, and Liam McHugh, Molly Karam, Reese Waters. You're talking MMA, I'm talking baseball. If I would have told you then and fast forwarded you in a DeLorean to where this space is now with MMA and with the UFC, would you ever have believed that it got that big?
Honestly, yes. And that's partially why I decided to, devote my life to covering this sport. When I got to Syracuse in 2001, when I got to, the place where all the young sports broadcasters dream of going, because I looked up to the likes of Marv Albert and Bob Costas and wanted to be just like them. But when I was growing up in the Montreal Jewish community, there weren't a lot of kids who had the same dream as me. They all wanted to be, doctors, lawyers, accountants, following the family business. So I was pretty unique. But then I get to Syracuse and I'm surrounded by 1,000 kids who have the exact same dream as me. And so I have always liked to be someone who is a little bit different. And in 2001, I told my parents, everyone here is the same. Everyone here has a similar dream and goal. I don't want to follow them. And, there is this sport called MMA. There's this thing called the UFC, which at the time was 8 years old. It isn't really being covered the way I think it should be covered. As a general sports fan, I see how other sports are being covered, including boxing. And I'm like, where's, I don't know, where's the professionalism? Where are the outlets? Where are the interviews, et cetera, et cetera? And I said, maybe I could be the voice of this sport. Maybe I could be the Howard Cosell of this sport. That's what I said to them because I loved it, because I loved the NBA and I loved the NFL and I loved Major League Baseball, but I also loved combat, pro wrestling, boxing, MMA. And there was something about those fights and those characters and the buildup and the tension and all that stuff. And so 2001, I told them, I think this sport could be just as big as anything else out there. And slowly but surely, here we are in 2024, and it's on ESPN, and it's just as mainstream, and it's probably in America more popular than boxing to a degree. So it has come a long way. But I'd be lying if I didn't say I felt like this couldn't happen, because I really did feel like it could happen.
Yeah, and it's made huge stars, and clearly, forefront of that, Conor McGregor, a huge piece of the puzzle that's gotten us here. I wanted to start there because maybe you could help me figure this out. He has said consistently he wants to fight. It's not that, like Dana seems to claim, he's got too much money. He wants to fight. He wants to be there. He's not fought yet. Michael Chandler's been waiting for seemingly a century. It's been 2 years, whatever it is. They may fight at the end of July. Why is it taken so long, in your opinion?
It's a very complex one, and there's a lot of politics involved. And the UFC likes to say that they're the place where there aren't any politics, but as the sport gets bigger, that happens. Conor McGregor demands a lot of money, and I think the UFC is on fire. And quite frankly, they don't necessarily need him. Business would be great if he was around, but he demands a lot. And I think if they could put the toothpaste back in the tube and not give him as much leverage and power, they would do so. They've never done that for anyone. And he came, Conor was a great fighter, obviously, and still is, in my opinion, and had a lot of tools and a lot of traits that worked to his benefit. But one thing that he also had on his side was timing. His timing was impeccable, because as he's rising, the UFC is on the verge of being sold. And then there's a new ownership group that now feels like they have this big fish, and they're going to give him all this power and leverage so that they can start to recoup the amazing amount of money that they paid for the UFC. And that coincides with the Mayweather fight, which they have always said that they would never do and never let anyone do, because they wouldn't want to give someone of their, of their own, one of their contracted fighters, to go out and fight for someone else on a different platform, et cetera, et cetera. And so that all kind of led to all of this. And now he's become a super duper star. Dana likes to say, oh, he has too much money, this and that. And Conor saying, no, I'm ready to go. Then he says he's got the movie, and Conor says, no, I'm ready to go. And so the latest in all of this is they've settled on June 29th. They've yet to officially announce it. Rapidly approaching, not too far away, a little over 2 months away. Um, and the other sort of storyline off to the side, which they don't want to talk about, is that he has 2 fights left on his deal. And I think it's good for business to have Conor McGregor a part of the family, but not necessarily be able to, or have to pay him all the time. So, 2 fights left. Now you get to 1 fight left. Now you're staring at him becoming a free agent and having a big fight in Saudi Arabia or some other promotion. So, they're kind of just they're moving at a snail's pace, because it's good when they're going into these TV rights negotiations next year, and they will start this year saying, hey, we've got a Conor McGregor pay-per-view on the horizon, and we got this, that, and the other. If it's, hey, what are you guys doing with Conor? He's on the last fight of his deal. Is he going to be a part of this plan that you're selling us, this package that you're selling us? So I think there's a lot of things at play here. Ultimately, we all hope he fights June 29th, and then it's going to get really interesting when he has 1 fight left. What happens then?
You mentioned Saudi. Before we get to 300, I want to ask you, Chimaev Whitaker. You say Hamza Chimaev, and like most MMA fans, I'm there. Doesn't matter who he's fighting. I think we'd all be there. He's an appointment story. He's got to be one of the nicest guys in MMA, coming off the fight against Costa. What's your take on this matchup as we lead towards it, announced here last couple of days?
Okay, I love the fight, but I just want to ask you real quickly, is my connection okay?
Yeah. Yeah, you're good. You're perfect.
Okay.
I hear and see
Okay, because I
absolutely
just I
perfect.
just noticed I was on the alternate Wi-Fi, and so I just want to make
No,
sure that
I
it's not
got you
like choppy or
perfect.
anything.
Yeah, don't worry. I got
Okay.
you totally perfectly. Don't worry about it.
All right, perfect. I worry about these things. Love the fight. The UFC was supposed to make its debut in Saudi Arabia on March 2nd, and what I was told was, these individuals in Saudi Arabia, they want the biggest and the best. They want a lot of people to be talking about their events, and they felt like the event wasn't up to their standards. So they said, "All right, we understand you have big cards coming up. You have 300 in April, this and that. Let's regroup and do it in June." They've got the May 18th Tyson Fury Alexander Usyk unification bout. They've got the June 1st Artur Beterbiev Dmitry Bivol fight, and then this will come June 22nd, and it works really nicely for the UFC because it will be June 22nd on ABC, so here in America, live and free, and they will use that as a commercial to sell, hopefully, the June 29th Conor McGregor fight. Perfect platform, right? So obviously, when you're putting on a big fight there with the Muslim fighters in the UFC, you have several that you can choose from. Islam Makhachev is a champion. Not probably going to put him on a free card. Next best thing, Hamza Chimaev. Just as popular, gigantic star in the sport, and in particular with the Muslim community. He's fighting a true blue middleweight, the former middleweight champion, Robert Whitaker, who looked solid in his fight against Paulo Costa, as you said, got back on track after the loss to DDP. This is the test that Hamza needs at 185, because you'll recall he was supposed to fight Costa in October. Costa gets hurt, staph infection, elbow. In comes Kamaru Usman, 170-pounder, former 170 champ, who really gave him a tougher fight than most people expected. And so now it feels like the guy who we all said, including myself, was going to be a surefire champion at 170 and probably 185. Now we're starting to think like, did we overhype him? Did we misread this one? I still think he could be a champion, but there's the question of consistency, there's the question of the gas tank, there's the question of the size, and there's the question of the travel. It's one of the great mysteries in this sport. Why can't he come to America? Why can't he fight more often? Why does he always fight in the Middle East? So these are things that haven't really been addressed. It works out June 22nd, big, what I think should be a number one contender fight at 185.
Yeah, you mentioned the Usman fight, and if I recall correctly, at the end, it seemingly looked like if that goes 5, Kamaru's got a really good chance to win that. So that's got to be right. One of the big questions in the main event, I assume it's going to be 5 rounds, is the gas tank against a guy like Whitaker, who we know is not going to go away.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Whitaker is incredible in 5 round fights. And for the most part, incredible when he's not fighting the likes of Israel Adesanya
You're
and
right.
DDP, who he lost to back in July, who's the current champion, Dricus du Plessis. But I really chalk that. I'm not taking anything away from DDP, but I really felt after talking to Robert about it, like that's just one of those things where it wasn't his night. And I would love to see that one again down the line. That's why I think this is a perfect number one contender fight. But yeah, a lot of questions are going to be answered of Hamza. To me, all the pressure is on him here. Robert has already climbed the mountaintop. Obviously, he wants to get back there, but Hamza is the one who hasn't quite realized the potential because of his bout with COVID, which really sidelined him, which for a moment actually retired him. He had retired and then decided to come back, and then all this travel stuff and the inconsistency. Like, I would really love to see him try to get at least 2 fights in 2024. It's been, one fight here and more than a year there, and that stuff that just keeps building up and is never good for the gas tank. It's never good for your fighting career. So let's see. This comes 8 months after his last fight. If he can squeeze in another after this one, if he wins this fight and then can get a big time fight, if not a title fight later on in 2024, I think it will be great for him.
UFC 300, terrible poster, great card. I mean, really, I thought that was the Apex 100 poster, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, literally, it was fitting of it, but I think I could have made that graphic on Canva, but that's a whole nother thing.
Yes.
The
Me
card's
too.
amazing. Card's amazing, and the main event is a great fight. But did the UFC they've done such a great job at putting up big fights. They're on an amazing roll. But the level of pressure they seemed from the outside, me looking at it just as a fan, to put on themselves on this card seemed to be so massive that almost anything as a main event that wasn't Conor was going to be a disappointment. Are we underrating the card because of the massive pressure they put on this thing leading up to the announcement of the main event?
Well, I'm happy that you said anything other than a Conor fight, because the Conor fight would have been perfect for this card
Yeah,
and no one would have batted an eye.
no,
And I think there were some other fights that would have been perfect, like Cheeto versus Sean, I think would have been fine, but that was great for Miami. It was perfect. The Ecuadorian fans were there, and Sean is such a big star. Um, Here's the thing: the only one who truly put pressure on the UFC to make this into like the greatest night of all time was Dana White. Dana White was the
right.
one saying like, "You guys are gonna have your minds blown. This is gonna be the greatest." It's like, all right, and we've been talking about this for months. Like, okay, can't wait to see what they offer us. Um, and then just as think look, here's the thing, and I feel for them in this regard, believe it or not. Fans demand banger after banger after banger, and we've been getting that. 296 was tremendous. 297 was so-so, but 298 was incredible, and 299 was incredible. And so if you want these bangers after banger after banger, then there are going to be some cards that are going to suffer.
Right.
And
That's
so,
right.
like, look at 301. Not
You.
great. You know what
No.
I mean? So it's impossible. This isn't pro wrestling where like John Cena could wrestle every month. You know what I mean? It just
Mhm.
doesn't work that way. And so I agree with you. It's a great card. If it was 301 or 302 or 303 or anything but like a round nice number, I don't think anyone would be complaining. But I do understand some fans who are like, this isn't quite what we had in mind. When you think about 200, when it was supposed to be Jones and DC, and it was supposed to be Brock Lesnar and all this stuff, is like, man, that was I think 200 just had like the sexier main card, if you will. Top to bottom, it's phenomenal. It's great. There's no stinker on the card. Every fight matters. Every fight has fighters who have great resumes and legacies and stakes attached to it. But I do feel like the main event just kind of falls short, and we're missing that one marquee super duper fight. And the thing that makes it an even bigger pill, tougher pill to swallow, is the fact that that main event would be perfect for 301.
Yeah,
And
right.
so
Exactly.
they robbed Peter to pay Paul. It's unfortunate for the Brazilian fans. Pereira in Brazil would have been an incredible scene. And so I wish that was that. And then I personally wish we would have had Izzy DDP as the 300 main. And I think that would have been the perfect rivalry and the perfect fight. DDP wasn't ready. I get that. He had just fought in January. So it is what it is. Come Saturday, April 13th, no one will be lamenting. No one will be crying about it. But I do understand some of the fans who are like, yeah, I wanted just a little bit more.
Yeah, I think, the people's fight, if you will, on the card is that BMF title. And whether it has the belt or not, Gaethje Holloway, how do you not get excited about? But the interesting dichotomy about this fight I wanted to ask you about is I'm so excited, like most fans are, because who doesn't? These are all timers, right? I mean, never in boring fights, all time fighters, BMF or not. It seems like to me we could have been in a spot where if Volk took a rest, you've got almost on the same card. You could have had Taporia and Holloway, and then you could have Gaethje, who would have been next for the title. And both
Huh.
these guys now get deviated off those tracks. What's your take? Forget the BMF for a second, but just on the fight for the two guys who we're all going to love it, but ... Does it make sense for either that they're fighting in this fight?
Well, I understand why you say forget the BMF, but, God, the BMF title annoys me. Its sheer existence annoys me for so many reasons, but first and foremost, I grew up in an era, so did you, where the champion of the world, the champion of the division, certainly the heavyweight champion, is the baddest mofo on the planet. That's what we've
Right.
been taught,
Yep.
like, that's what we've been told all this time.
Correct.
It's like the guy who's at the top holding the gold, and now you're telling me
That's right.
other guys in the division are the baddest? So what about, like, if I'm Islam Makhachev, I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm the baddest
It's like
mofo.
the
I'm the
hardcore
one."
title, right? I mean, it's like the
Yes,
hardcore belt,
and no
right?
one really respects that. So and then I wonder, and I feel like I know the answer to this, I don't think Max and Justin are fighting on 300 if not for the stupid BMF title. You know what I mean? And so to your point,
Yep.
they got deviated from a path to actual gold for this fictitious title that was just kind of concocted from the mind of Nate Diaz out of nowhere in a post-fight interview after beating Anthony Pettis in August of 2019. Like, what is the point of all of this? Now, I'm not going to be a stickler when those two guys are looking at each
Oh,
other in the cage. It's going to be tremendous. And I'll say this, and I believe you're a pro wrestling fan as well.
oh,
Max
big
Holloway
time.
just
Yeah.
a couple of days ago cut an incredible promo, one of his best, if not his best promos. And he's not a great like promo guy, but he was just saying like, "Yo, I'm tired of you people trying to put a limit on my career. I'm tired of you telling me what I need to do and what I should be doing. I'm on the pound for pound list. He's on the pound for pound list. Why can't we fight and see who's the baddest man?" And I was like, you know what, Max? Okay, I dig that. This is what I need. I needed a reason to care, a why. Why is this happening? I know why Kayla Harrison, Holly Holm is happening. I know why Pereira and Hill is happening, and Zhang Wei Li and Yan China. I know why Rakic and Prochaska are happening. They're trying, but what is the reason for this fight? Why is Max Holloway moving up from 145 and halting his run at 45? And why is Gaethje, who was on the cusp of fighting for a belt, taking this fight instead? So now I feel like I have a why and I'm all in. Um, but yeah, it's a little bit funky, and perhaps the biggest winner in all of this will be Dustin Poirier. Perhaps he gets a title shot at 302 as a result of all of this, and I can't hate that because I think that would be a pretty darn good story.
You mentioned talking about pro wrestling. I got to ask you, and I saw, by the way, I haven't watched the whole thing yet in its entirety. A great job with CM Punk yesterday. For those who have not heard or seen that, should catch your interview.
Thank you.
I got to ask you about WrestleMania 40. So I was out of the game for a long time after the Attitude Era. My son, who's 9, is desperately into it. So I'm kind of back in the last couple of years. And last year, we thought the close of the Cody Rhodes story was going to
Yeah.
be that triumphant win, and it didn't happen. And look, I don't know what the plans were, but if you look at the last year and the way it's worked, maybe it was the right thing to do to kind of take it away from us. Now, let me lead you to this. We're a few days away. It can't be the right thing to do again, right?
Okay, so I will tell you this. I was mad. I was there last year, WrestleMania 39, and I was pissed off. I was pissed off. I'm not a, I was the guy, in the stand saying it's still real to me, damn it. Like I wanted that moment and I wanted to witness that moment. And not only that, I was pissed off in February, a few weeks before, because I was in Montreal and Sami Zayn of Montreal was in there against Roman Reigns. And I thought he should have won that night. I thought Sammy should have won that night. And that place, I have never heard, and I've been to some big time events in Montreal, the Canadians run in the 90s, the close of the Forum, the opening of the Molson Center, incredible Expos games against the Braves back in the day. Like I had never heard Montreal that loud, and they wanted it so bad. And I thought he should have won. And then Cody, I thought he should have won. And then they both didn't win. And then I went to the Raw after Mania on the Monday after in LA, and they did this whole thing with Cody. And then Roman takes an extended break. And I was like, what was the point of all this? Why didn't you just put the belt on Cody? Why couldn't you have given us this? Why is it when it always feels like we want something so bad, the bookers don't give it to us in wrestling? It's the one sport that you could actually give it to us, right? You can't say, oh, you got to play the game. It's the one where you can actually deliver. And so I was mad. I was mad for a long time. Now I have to tell you, a couple of days before 40, they freaking nailed it. And I don't know if this was the plan from the beginning, but holy cow, this has been tremendous theater. This stuff with The Rock and
Oh,
Roman
it's amazing.
and Seth and Cody. And I love I don't really love, believe it or not, I understand why they do it from a business standpoint. I don't love the 2-night thing. To me, it's like one event, you see it, you're done. Even if it's 7 hours, fine. But I love the fact that the main event of night one bleeds into night two, because the stipulation is if Rock and Roman beat Cody and Seth, or I should say, really, it's more if Cody and Seth win, then the Bloodline are banned from ringside on night 2 when it's Cody versus Roman. So I love that there's a thread there from night 1 to night 2. And The Rock has been amazing. And any old school fan will tell you, just like yourself, like, man, that's Hollywood Rock. That's like the old school Rock. That's the corporate Rock from back in the day
Yes.
with the
One we love.
Versace and the shades.
Yes.
Yes, we
Yeah.
love
Oh,
that
it's the
guy. Like the
best. It's the
Disney Rock
best.
is nice and wholesome, but like
Yeah, it's
we all
okay.
fell in love with this guy.
Yeah.
So it's been great. And now I'll say, all right, they got me. They got it right. But to your question, please just give us this moment for
Gotta happen
goodness
this
sakes.
time. It's gotta happen this time.
Now, what I think will happen, you didn't really ask me this, but this is my theory,
Yeah. Go
and it
ahead.
almost feels too obvious. Rock turns on Roman, Cody wins, and then we build to Rock Roman next year. That's what I think
To
could
finally get
happen,
it.
but almost seems
Yeah.
too obvious at this point. So I don't know.
I'm excited for it, whatever it is. They've certainly got me hooked. Speaking of which, you talk about combat sports and Mania. You hit a number of things on your show, and the one thing that I wanted to ask you more than anything else, knowing from my years in talk radio, it is so hard to create ensemble. You can't. You can create plans and rundowns and all of that, but when you have a cast in a show, it just either works or it doesn't. And I got to give your group so much credit because it is so
Well,
much
thanks.
fun to watch Amina and listen to it because you get to know. It reminds me of, and I know you're a Howard guy too, Howard. I think of Mike and the Mad Dog when I remember this is how long ago, Ian Eagle being the 2020 Flash guy and the Birdman coming in and having the conversation for 2.5 minutes. And you felt like, right, all those guys, you knew them. Just how difficult is that in this business to come up with, and how have you done it so successfully? How much is an accident and how much is actual effort from your group to do it?
Well, that's a great compliment, and I appreciate that. I know they would as well. I grew up with Howard Stern. I grew up listening to all of this. I remember Mike Breen doing the updates on
Yep.
WFAN with
Yep.
Imus, right? And I
Yep.
love that stuff. I love the family, and it's why like I admire what McAfee has built with his boys, and I admire what Dan Patrick has built and what Rich Eisen. Those are the best shows in my opinion, right? And I've always felt like it's never been about me. So much so that when I was doing a Saturday morning combat sports radio show at Syracuse when I was a student, when no one was listening except my mom and my sister on WERW Syracuse Student Radio. I created a producer, a fictitious character named Lester, who I would speak to, but he would never speak back to me just so I can have the banter with someone.
Yep.
That's how much it was ingrained in my brain.
Yep.
And the first person I met was New York Rick, and he was just a kid who wanted to help out. And I was like, no, 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 I want to talk to you. I want to interact. He had no ambitions whatsoever to ever be on air. And that was great. And we grew together for many years. And then I went to ESPN. And actually, for whatever reason, and I'm not quite sure why, at ESPN, I tried to create characters. I tried to do the same thing. I did the same show, it just had a different name. And
Mhm.
I was met with a lot of resistance. I don't know if it's the way they're built. I don't know if it's what they're told, but no one really wanted to talk to me. And that was frustrating. I love that stuff. And so when I
Yes.
went back, I was like, oh, maybe this can happen, but it has to happen organically, just like it happened with Rick. And it's amazing. Like the audio guy, Mysterious Frank, was just presented to me. He's like, "Oh, this is the audio guy," and I was like, "Oh, this guy's great. He's got dry wit. He's quick. This and that." He had audio guys don't speak. He's literally the audio guy. But I love Fred from Howard Stern, and he's a
Oh,
massive
yeah.
part of the show. And
Yes.
so to me,
Yes.
Frank is that. And then Connor, who replaced Rick as producer. Rick is more on the social side and on air now. He was just like he was a guy that was recommended to me from ESPN Radio. And again, when I first met him and we interviewed and all that, there was no talk from us about like I'm like, yeah, I might throw it to you here and there, but you never know how someone's going to be on air, right? Like they
Right,
could
exactly.
completely bomb, and he's come a long way. And he's turned it. I like to say he's like the guy could do no wrong. He's the biggest baby face in the business because the fans just adore him. And so I'm so thankful. I'll tell you, like, so my contract is up in August, and I'm going to make some changes, and the show's going to evolve in a very good way. But every single person that I speak to about the show, I say to them, I will never do this show again without those three guys. So is this a package deal? I'm not leaving them, and I hope they don't leave me. And I hope that we can do this show together for 50 years because I've never had more fun doing anything than doing the show with them.
I love that, man. I want to bounce away before we get out of here. One quickie on basketball, then baseball, of course, before I get
Yeah.
out. Our Knicks. So, speaking of not being able to have good things, with Cody taken away from us, here are the Knicks. They present to us, in my opinion, the most exciting team to watch outside of the Jeremy Lin 2 weeks. since 98, 99. And that
Mm.
team with Spree and Allen Houston and Camby in that run, which was so much, I know shortened season and whatever, but so much fun to watch. But we can't be healthy. We keep having injuries. We have heartbreaking. I'm just planning for despair. Am I wrong? I mean, how are you? I know we're negative, Nellies, but how are you looking at this next season when you see the lack of health right now with OG and Randall?
Well, first of all, I'm having a blast because I think all Knicks fans, all we want is just to be relevant. And there's
Yes.
no better time than spring in New York. And there's no team that unifies the city more than the Knicks, right? There are Mets and Yankees fans, diehard fan bases, and Jets, Giants, and Islanders, Rangers. But the Knicks are New York City's team. Sorry, Nets fans, all six of you. So I just love the fact that we're going into April now relevant. I love I love Jalen Brunson. I would take a bullet for that guy. I adore him. I love the fact that the son of the 15th man on that 99 team is the savior now. I love
Yep.
that story. Rick Brunson,
Yep.
his father, who was on those late 90s teams. And I love the pieces. They're so much fun to watch. And my kids have finally gotten into the Knicks. I've been trying to will them into this, and something clicked this year. My older son loves Josh Hart. My middle son loves Jalen and Dante DiVincenzo. They love Isaiah Hartenstein. They just got to meet a bunch of them as we were early to a game recently, and that was incredible, taking them to their first game. And so it's fun when your kids are into it too. But yes, there is this part in the back of my mind that's like, oh, if we just had OG and Julius and Mitch healthy, like we'd be legit contenders. Not just a good story,
Oh no, for
legit
real. Yes.
title contenders. And
Hmm.
and and I think I speak for you when I say this, like, I just want one, man. I just
Oh.
want to know what it feels like. One one night in June when you can exhale and see your Knicks just like showered in champagne, draped in the confetti, and just up there. I just want to know what that I get chills just talking about it. I just want to know what it feels like. And I feel like Jalen is the guy, and I feel like he's destined for greatness, but certain things have to fall your way. And so let's see. I'm holding out hope for Julius. I'm holding out hope for OG. It's not looking too promising at the moment. But yeah, to your point, like those games on Friday and Sunday, I mean, how much fun was that? And then of course it ends in
Oh.
heartbreak. Like the Wemby game on Friday was just theater at its finest, and then the Thunder game on. But it's like, gosh, please. And I believe this, and correct me if you feel otherwise. Like, you know, we need that 2-3. If
Oh
we
yeah.
fall to 4, that's the
No.
difference between a
Forget
magical
it. No.
run and a
Forget it.
second round exit,
Forget it.
right?
Yeah.
Especially
Forget it.
banged up. So we need that
Yes.
2-3, and I feel like 2 is right there. I feel like home court up until the Eastern Conference Finals, which we probably will face the Celtics then, bring them on, is right there. And that's the part that's so frustrating. But I love this team. I love the vibes. They're so fun to root for. They're so likable. I love the fact that, Thibodeau is finally getting his respect as Knicks coach. Like, I could go on and on on this,
Oh,
but
I'm with you.
I'm just hoping for the best, and I'm just so excited to see how it all plays out.
I'm right there with you. We deserve some joy, and you even more than me because you're a Bills fan. But we'll save that for another day.
Let's go
Um,
to and an Expos fan. May they
Yeah, I
rest
was
in
gonna say, let
peace.
me end there because speaking of sad, so I was at the time working for MLB.com. I was there the last 3 games up at Olympia. I was there. I saw the tears. I saw, had conversations with people in the streets. Those are some of my fondest memories as a young broadcaster in terms of being at an event that I knew mattered. And I know that relationship that city has as a good example of somebody who was a diehard then for that specific team. What is your relationship now with baseball? How difficult is it still to even tie in? Are you watching Jays and latch onto them? Do you watch certain players? Not at all. I mean, what's the relationship of an exposed diehard this many years later?
That's a fantastic question because I was a diehard. Like, I know people joke that they didn't exist. They did exist, and I adored those teams, especially the '90s teams. I think I've told you, like Lenny Webster, Jeff
Hmm.
Facero's personal catcher was
Hmm.
my favorite Expo number
Yep.
25. I adored
Cliff
him.
Floyd, my
Was
former broadcast
Cliff
partner, of
Floyd,
course,
who
with the Big
who I
Maddox hit,
invited
of
to
course.
my bar
Yeah.
mitzvah. Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, all of them. Pedro, Vladdy, Senior,
Yeah.
Ken Hill, Jeff Facero, all these guys, Darren Fletcher, Larry Walker, I could go on and on, and Rondell White. I adored them, and when they left in '04, and I was at that final series as well at Chase Stadium against the Mets, I was heartbroken. I remember being on the subway going back home with my brother, who I went to a lot of games with. And I remember saying to myself, like, I will never, ever watch baseball ever again. Forget being a Nationals fan. Screw the Nationals. I will never watch baseball ever again. And truth be told, I did not watch a single inning until 2015. I was aware of what was going on. I'm a sports fan. You see stuff, but like it really, truly hurt me. And then I will be honest, 2015, I remember we moved. I had to do a really long commute to work. It was summertime. I was like a little bit lost and not really, felt lonely on these commutes. And a Montrealer named Alex Anthopoulos had the cojones to pull off a couple of big deals at the trade deadline, Tulowitzki, David Price, etc. And I was like, am I robbing myself of joy here? You know, my kids are getting a little bit older. Canada's team, why not? And I fell in love with those Jays. Josh Donaldson, who I then kind of became
With the
friendly
big
with,
homer.
of
Yeah.
course, Edwin Encarnacion, like they were very likable and they had a couple runs then. And honestly, I thought that they could have beaten the Royals. Remember, they made it to the ALCS against the Royals and had a pretty good shot. And so I have adopted the Jays as my own. My kids root for the Jays. Baseball is probably fourth on their pecking order, but it will never, ever, ever be the same. I will drop them in a second if the Expos ever came back. That's not my hometown. It's my country, but it's not my hometown. It will never be the same. One thing that has made it easier is Vladdy Jr. because I loved his dad so much. And I remember when he used to go to games, the fact that I feel like he's the thread from those Expos teams to now makes me feel good about it, but it will never be the same. And it's hard for me to, I don't feel the same about the Jays as I do the Bills and Knicks just because I didn't bleed and sweat and cry about them when I was a kid in the 90s. It'll never be the same. And in fact, I rooted for the Braves to beat them in 92 when they had their first World Series win. So I got to be honest about that.
It's been a joy to do this with you, man. I appreciate you coming on. It's an honor. I enjoy your work and have for years, obviously, since the last time we've seen each other. I'm so happy for you and all the successes and appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Same to you. Keep up the great work and wish you and your
Thank you,
family
sir.
all the best.
There he is, Ariel Helwani. You can get us on Unfiltered, of course, Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts, and all across social media. We'll see you next time, courtesy of our good friends at Bet Online.